All right, so before we get started, are there any sort of general questions maybe that you've run into trying to work on this at home, or anything in class here that we can take a quick talk about before we get into our regular lecture? Any general questions? Yes.
I'm still having issues getting going to work on the thing. I go into the HTC website, it leads me to the same program, no matter even if I do a search, and I'm downloading it right now, but I still can't.
You download that program and you install it.
I'm
Have you been able to get that far? But on another computer?
On not at home, but here, but it just doesn't want to. Like if I do emulator on Android, it brings up basically a virtual app instead of going to my Android.
Sometimes what works is to not have the emulator running. Then you want to do Taco Run Android, and it might go to your Android phone instead of the emulator. So do you recall if you've had an emulator open and your device plugged in?
I didn't have an emulator. It made one up though.
There was also the...
I tried force running it from what we told us on we told me on Thursday, but even doing that, it still brought up an emulator.
So force running it like this?
Yeah.
Even this way it doesn't quite behave.
Pretty much. So I'm trying to, maybe it was just the computer or not, I don't know, but I'm trying it right now, so hopefully.
Depending on your device sometimes. So when you plug it in, is there any feedback on the screen that Windows finds the device?
Yes, it finds the device.
Now sometimes on your device, if you pull down from the top, it'll then have some options. It'll say you're connected to a computer. And there might be different options you can toggle. Some of them say, you know, as a storage device, as a camera device, I think as an MPT device. Sometimes just switching between those different kinds of devices and trying to run Taco might work. There's just such a range of devices and such. HTC is a big name, and it should work, so maybe remind me during a break and such, and we'll further look into it.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else with any sort of general questions about anything? All right, so today what we're going to do then is talk about some new stuff in a handout that I've got for you. So everyone's computer should be on by now. Let's go to the top left corner. Go into Computer, Window, and then Network Location, of course. And Classroom Data, Drive Z, and we'll go to our folder, which is Campus Android 2. And what I've got for you in there is the very last handout that we looked at last time was number 5, and there were 2 parts to that, and so we skipped the first part and went to the second part. We'll get back to the first part a little bit later, which is to look at the monitor. No, actually we did do monitor, didn't we? We did monitor, and look at my own handout. I thought we didn't. I thought we screenshots. Yeah, so we talked about screenshots through monitor, but we skipped the first part, which is looking at the log cat, which is kind of like console. When we're running a web project and loading it in the web browser and we pull up the console to see any errors and such, we have a version of that also inside of monitor.bat. So we'll get back to this one in a bit. There's a new handout. It's number 6. We're going to switch gears a little bit. All of part 1 last month and last week we've been doing a lot of programming, a lot of coding. And as I said before, part of the whole process is also the artistic aspect of things. We have yet still to customize the design of our app. It's still sort of the boring gray, but at least what we're going to do now is start to talk about the assets, the splash screen and that sort of thing related to our project. So make sure you get that handout number 6, and we'll see what this one is about, and we're gonna indulge a little bit in our creative aspect of things. So copy number 6, handout number 6 over. I'm going to copy that to my desktop. If you've got a flash drive, of course, put it in your flash drive. Now, number 6 talks about setting up our various app assets. That assumes you've got some kind of app. As we were working with previously on the previous handouts, we created a template project. So on my flash drive, I have a folder, it's called Apps, and in there I created a project called Template. And so I forgot to put it in my folder last time. I'll put it in the folder in just a moment. But I'm going to put a copy of my work there from last time in case you want it. You probably have your own template file from previous days. Keep working with it if you'd like. I'm going to give you also a copy of mine. In just a moment. And while I'm getting that prepped, let's look at handout number 6. If you want to open number 6. This is about adding app icons and then a section on the splash screen. So on a technical level, it's not that complicated what we need to do. We have some sort of, template, placeholder graphics that are part of our project. We just need to replace those with our own graphics. So on a technical level, not that complicated. But let me ask you this. How many of you feel you have any artistic ability, computer-wise? Raise your hand. Very few people, which is what I expect in a computer class. Most people, if you're very good at programming, you're perhaps not very good artistically. You just don't know it, actually. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Photoshop. Yeah, everyone's already signed it. What we're going to do is we're going to use Photoshop, and Photoshop actually helps us a lot, especially if we don't have very much artistic ability. So, template, call this template 2016-03, and last week was, what was the last time? The 3rd. If you would like a copy of my project from last week, wait about a minute, and then you can copy from the folder template 2016-03. I apologize, I should have put it before the start of class, so don't try to copy that folder yet until mine copies in there in 1 minute. So don't look in that folder yet. But the handout is, we're first going to create some graphics, app icons. I want icons for my project. Right now we've got the little generic Cordova mascot. We're going to make our own icons. Notice the requirements. 24-bit PNG files, which are square. If you don't know anything about graphics, there are various graphic formats that exist. PNG is one of the popular ones. It's a full-featured, full-color, lossless compression with transparency. If you don't know what that means, don't worry, I'll get to it. But we need icons in these sizes, 36 pixels squared up to 96 pixels for the different sizes of devices. If you've got an older device, the 36 pixel one will automatically load up and look nice on an old device. If you've got a newer device, more powerful screen, larger screen, it will load up the 96 pixel sized one. And we need to make these with transparency, because if you look at the icons on your device, most likely they usually have transparency in that on my home screen I've got the Google Play app. It's a little like shopping bag, and I can see through the handle to behind my wallpaper. So transparency, I can see through empty areas. The alternative would be that there would be a white color or any other color behind that shopping bag and I couldn't see through it. So it's asking us, the documentation asks us to create PNGs with transparency, which is what we're going to create. They need to be named specifically based on the template so that we can simply drop them into the project, compile the project, and we've got new icons. without any fuss in coding. So by now, if you would like a copy of last week's work, my work so far, you can get it from the network folder. It's template 2016-0303. You can copy that whole folder. That's where I left my project last time. If you've got your project from last time, your template, you can keep working with that. So, on my flash drive, I've got a copy of the work. I'm gonna put today's date on it. So I took a copy from my network folder, I put it on my flash drive, today's date. This is optional. You can use your own work. And inside of that folder, so go to your apps folder, open up your template project, and we've seen this before in the res folder. Open the res folder, resources, open icons, and then open Android. These are the icons we're going to replace. We're going to replace these icons with our own icons. I suppose what we could do is open these up directly and then just edit them, but I'll show you a better roadmap. We have a 96 pixel sized icon as the largest one here. But eventually when we get to the actual app stores to publish our project, it's going to require large, high-quality graphics, up to 512 pixels squared. So that was 96 pixels. And the thing about graphics is that it's not a good idea to take a small graphic and blow it up to be a large graphic. If I open up Photoshop and design a graphic at 36 pixels squared and then blow it up to 96 pixels, it'll look terrible. It'll look pixelated, it'll look blurry. It's not a good idea. So an adage of basic graphic design and web design is don't take a small graphic and make it large. You see that all over the place online and even in the real world. You probably go to stores and restaurants or whatever, and you see a poster of the food, and while you're standing in line looking at it, you see every dot. Because what they did was they took the graphic of the food from their website and printed it. And web graphics never print well. I see that shockingly on a lot of so-called professional things. I forgot what I just saw recently, but I saw some sort of flyer that looked really nice. I looked at it carefully, and the picture in the background was all blurry and pixelated. They had taken a small picture and blown it up, and then when printed, looks even worse. The opposite, however, is okay. If we take a large graphic and shrink it, that is a much better result. Because when you've got a small graphic that's only 36 pixels squared, the software has to invent pixels, fill in the missing pieces to get up to 96. If you've got something that big, there's literally not enough space, there's not enough matter, pixels, to blow it up. It has to invent pixels. That's how it gets blurry. When you've got a big graphic and shrink it down, it can just throw away pixels. Pixels that exist will get thrown away and then shrunk down to the right size. So if you want to make any notes, don't take a small graphic and make it large. Easy. You can take a big graphic and make it small. We are going to make our own graphics, and we have lots of ways to do this, but apparently in this room we've got one of the best ways. If you open your Start menu and in the Start search box there, start typing Photoshop. Photoshop, Adobe Photoshop, Creative Cloud 2015. So search at the bottom Photoshop. You should see Photoshop, not Elements, which is fine and more affordable. But we've got the big boys here, so we'll use Adobe Photoshop. How many of you have ever used Photoshop before this class? Very few of you. No problem. So Photoshop is the 20-year-old, 25-year-old software that's been changing the world, literally. And so what we're going to do is we can use any software to make our graphics. Photoshop, Illustrator, Microsoft Paint, I suppose. Just about anything to make graphics. If you've never used graphic software before, I'll be holding your hand throughout all of this, and I'll only show you enough for you to really do what you need to do. We need to make a graphic. And so we are presented with Photoshop here, lots of menu items, lots of tools. But the number one thing we need to do, at the top left corner, click File and New. I'm going to create a new file, a new graphic. File New. It'll ask you for a variety of options here. Let's change, first of all, document type to say web. I see they do have a mobile app design, but we won't use that. Let's use web. So our document will be for the web, because technically we've got a web project that we're turning into a mobile project. The name of the project says Untitled, and what I'll call this, I will call this icon-512. In the folder, we have 4 icons, 36, 48, 72, and 96. We're going to create one that is 512, like 4 times larger or more than the largest one. That's because, again, it's better to start off with a big graphic and shrink it down as necessary, instead of a small graphic and blow it up. So we're starting with a really big graphic that we can then shrink down, because eventually, as Android keeps progressing, as iPhones keep progressing, this 96 pixel sized graphic will no longer cut it. It will look low quality. Eventually we'll have the next level up, whatever that'll be, 144 pixels or something. So we're going to start with a large graphic at this point. This is just the name of the file. We haven't specified a width or a height. So under the width here, let's change that to 512, and the height 512. Don't worry if document type changes to custom, because it is. We've got our own custom width and height here. Resolution, no need to change. Advanced, no need to change. We added a name for the file, and we added dimensions. That's all we've done. Click on the top right, OK. And what we will get is a graphic. We will get a graphic. Here's our artboard, which is all of our viewable area. We've got a project here. It's got a white background temporarily. We don't want that, because think about it like this. When we create our icon, do you notice we can see through the edge of the picture, and whatever the background would be, if it was a yellow background, we would see yellow here. It looks white, but it just has to represent it as white. But there's transparency here. So if I have my background of, some stars, I would be able to see through my icon on the edges here to the wallpaper. So we want transparency in our graphic. On the right side, you should see a panel. Does everyone see a panel called Layers? It's a panel called Layers. And the reason Photoshop is so powerful, so popular and so powerful is because it can use layers, which is, in the real world, if I had this sheet of paper and I start drawing on it, I can't see through it. But in the digital world, I would be able to see through this sheet of paper, like a transparency in the old, overhead projectors. And below it, I would see something else, like a color. And because it's different sheets of paper in the real world, I can draw on this paper and then rearrange it so that it's down here. I drew something and it's on top of this thing over here. In the real world, I can rearrange my papers. I've got that also here in Photoshop. Layers. On one layer, I can draw one element, and on another layer, I can draw another. And the point of that is that then one is independent from the other, and I can move it around independent of the other. Imagine if I only had one sheet of paper, I drew a happy face, but I drew it in the wrong corner. And I wanted to move the happy face to the left, but I've only got one sheet of paper, so I can't. But if I drew the happy face on this sheet of paper, on the top left corner, and then move the happy face on its paper down to the left, I can do that. That's the concept of layers. Different things on different layers so you can keep manipulating them. This is a very powerful thing that didn't quite exist, you know, in the earliest computer drawing software. Layers, like using different sheets of paper, just like in the real world. So what I'm going to do here is, I've got a layer called Layer 1. It's currently visible. Click on that eye. And then what I'm going to do is, on the left side, we've got these various tools, brushes to draw with, and pencils, and all of these things that I might not be familiar with. But as I said, you might not have experience in graphics. Photoshop will help us because it has various shapes we can work with. Do you see near the bottom somewhere there's a hand, and right above the hand there's a rectangle. If you click on that, this gives you the rectangle tool. Most of these tools on the left, when you select them, then you have options at the top, like fill it with the color black. So let's just try this. Click the rectangle tool once. At the top options bar, you'll see fill, what color to fill. If you click that, you'll say, well, I can fill it with this color or that color. I'm just going to choose any color, and then what you can do is in the artboard draw a square. Well, I want to be more complex than basic squares. I want to use real shapes and interesting things. So what I'm going to do is undo that. Right? I'm able to take back my last step, like on any kind of software. If I mistype something on Word, I can undo it. If I make a mistake in Notepad while I'm coding, I can undo that. I don't really want this square, I want something more interesting, so go up to Edit, Undo, or Control Z. Undo rectangle. Do you see on the rectangle tool there's a little triangle in the corner? Most of the tools have a little triangle in its corner. There's so many tools, so many things you can do in Photoshop, everything is not obvious in the beginning. For example, we've got tools inside of tools, sort of like tucked away in a drawer. Tap and hold the rectangle. You have a rounded rectangle, that's also boring. An ellipse, that's also boring. But then you've got custom shape tool. This one's really cool. This one has a bunch of built-in shapes that we can borrow to make our own icons. So tap and hold or click and hold the rectangle tool, and then from the drop-down menu select Custom Shape tool. Notice then at the top, Options, you can choose color, yes, but then near the top right edge of those options you see Shape, and the current shape that I've got selected is an arrow. If I click and drag, I'll draw an arrow. Well, if you see up where you've got shape and you've got a drop-down item there, you can click and you've got a couple of other shapes. I've got a, like a light bulb number 2. If you hover over, it tells you this is light bulb number 2. So what I can do with this is maybe draw a cool light bulb as my app icon. We can, of course, do other cool things, as we'll see. But, okay, I've got some built-in icons here that I can work with. Kind of cool. Very limited. So, look at this. If you click on the little down arrow, and you see a little gear, click on that gear, and you have animal icons, music icons, nature icons, web icons. Here's what I'm going to do. Select all icons. From that menu there, that little gear, click all. It'll say, would you like to replace or append? Click OK to replace. Now you've got lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of icons. I'm going to drag that corner box and make it big so I can see all of these icons. obviously, not every single icon that exists is here. This is a bunch to choose from. It's probably, I don't know, 70 icons, 60 icons or something. Lots of icons to choose from. Perhaps one of these might fit for your app. I'm going to show you some other tricks we can do in Photoshop, but again, not very much artistic ability needed. This is drawn for us, but let's say this is the unofficial continuing education app for the college, right? We're making an app for the college. In your opinion, would anyone like to opine? Are any of these icons here possibly good to use as an app icon for an app about a school? You know, education and learning and all of that. Any opinions? Question mark for knowledge. What's that? Any opinions? What about these two students here? If you look around somewhere there, you might find students. You know, I could have a couple of students that might represent my app. The point is here, you are free to choose any icon that you like. I'm going to choose this one, but there's an icon that I like here, and notice when you click and drag, this is just something that you get used to. You know, you might click and drag and draw it here, and whoops, I'm drawing it off the edge. I should have drawn it up there. If I try to drag up, it'll, you know, it doesn't move like you might think. You've started to draw it at a certain point. You might have to let it go and then undo and try again. I want to fill this artboard as big as possible with my icon, because right now it's huge, but that's going to be the little icon of your app when it's on the home screen. So if you drew an icon this big, when we export that, it's going to be even smaller on your device. So don't draw an icon that small. Make it as big as that artboard. That's the whole bounds of your icon. Yes?
After you highlight the icon, how do you get it onto the artboard?
After you highlight it here in this area, then all you need to do is in the artboard start to click and drag to actually draw it. And you know, I might have missed, I might have put it in the wrong place, so here's the trick. I haven't let go of the mouse yet. I'm still drawing it, but it's in the wrong place. If I hold the space bar while I have my mouse down, I'm moving it around. So once again, if I don't have my hand on the space bar, I'm drawing it, and whoops, I didn't start on the top left corner. It doesn't let me put it up there. I'm going to let you put it up there when you've got your mouse down. When you hold the space bar, now when you move the mouse, I haven't let go of the mouse yet, now I can reposition it right here, let go of the space bar, and now continue to draw it. Yes, this is not a Photoshop class. There's many tricks and techniques. Take our IMCP program, take our Photoshop class. You're going to learn all this stuff. But for the moment, I want to draw an icon as big as I can in that area. I don't like that color. It looks kind of scary, so maybe I'll select a nice pleasant green color. Notice on my layers, I've got a new layer with a new shape. And I've got that other layer down there for the background. Let's say I drew this icon right here, and again, I didn't exactly place it where I want it. I can still move things around if I switch to this Move tool. I don't like that they changed the classic Move tool icon. But anyway, that Move tool, that first icon, if you click that icon, what it does is it lets you move things, such as this thing that you drew. So you use one tool to draw it and one tool to move it. You're using the shapes. You can put more than one if you'd like. But be careful because, again, these things are going to be small. And so when you get it down to that level of smallness, detail is not going to be that noticeable. You can draw with the shape tool and then you can move it into place. Let's say you're drawing it, but you know, it's too skinny, too tall, too wide, whatever. As you're drawing a shape, if you hold down the Shift key on the keyboard, it stays in proportion. So right here, I'm making it a little too skinny. If I'm holding Shift while I'm holding the mouse button, it stays in proportion. So let's say I drew something, I colored it, still looks a little boring. What we can do is we can add various effects to the graphic. Do you see on your layers panel, you've got your shape layer selected because it's highlighted. You can select layers. But I've got my shape layer selected and I see something that says FX. What do you think FX stands for? Effects. So, if you click on FX, you can add a drop shadow to that, overlay a pattern onto it, or a gradient, or another color. You can give it some glows or strokes and such. Let's check out drop shadow. So make sure your shape 1 layer is selected, not layer 1, but shape 1 layer. Make sure shape 1 layer is selected. And then down on the bottom of your layers, click on Add Layer Style, the effects, that is, and click Drop Shadow. You'll get this screen here. There's a bunch of options. Again, they read a whole book of Photoshop, and they have for 25 years. But I've got here a drop shadow. Notice on the left, I've got a style of the drop shadow with a bunch of options, such as the degree of the shadow and the distance from the object, and all of these things that I can play with all day long. Let's say I'm changing this distance value. The drop shadow comes out further from the objects. Let's say I put 45 degrees angle. So now it's on the side there. What does spread do? I don't know, but let me change it. Oh, okay, it makes it bigger or thicker or whatever. What does size do? Oh, it blurs it. This is how people learn software or Photoshop. They play with these things. They click on this, they make a mistake, they undo, they try again. Or they get a book or they enroll in a class. But here, we're just kind of playing with this. Maybe I want to add a drop shadow. Maybe I want to, hey, I can colorize my drop shadow. Make it a cool red drop shadow. So again, this world of digital imaging is huge. This is a multi-week class that we offer on many aspects of this. I can mix and match this stuff. I've got the drop shadow activated, and then I also clicked the bevel and emboss. And now it looks like I've got a little 3D effect on the shape. So I can totally do what I want here. I've added a drop shadow, I've added a bevel, and I've added a stroke. And I'm going to get a stroke from that because this is web design, this is graphic design, this is a whole topic in and of itself. And if we're not a programmer, this is the coolest thing and this is the scariest thing because this is a whole huge software to learn and to get good at. Because if you're going to be an app designer, not only do you have to program it all, but if you're the only person on your team, you're going to need to think about this as well. My app icon, my splash screen, my color combinations. I don't know anything about color combinations, but I think red and green will look great together. And so this is something that you do need to explore. We don't get to it very much in this class, just enough in the aspect of how do I get something to show for my app. And so what I'm going to do here is just give us a couple of minutes for you to explore. There's still a whole bunch we can do with Photoshop, but I want you to just sort of concentrate on maybe adding a shape, and then maybe adding a couple of effects. It might not be perfect, but we'll continue to work with it later. I'll give you a couple of minutes to work, but actually before that, we should save this masterpiece. While you work on a project, we should save a working copy of it before the final version so we can come back. So I'll give you a moment to work, but let's do this first. Top left corner, let's go to File, Save As. Let's go to File menu, Save As. I'm going to select my flash drive, and I'll put a copy of my icon in the network folder later. But I'm going to go to my flash drive, and you can put it anywhere you want. This is not the PNG, the PNG version that the documentation is asking for yet. This is going to be a PSD version, a Photoshop document. It's our work in progress document. It's not done. It's not ready yet. I want to save this just in case the power goes out or whatever. Question?
Will this flatten it out?
No. This will keep it as a layer. PSD format keeps all of our work in progress content. It'll flatten it once we finally export it. So you can save this wherever you want. I'm going to save it in my folder of this class. You can put it in your apps or wherever, but I'm going to save it in my class folder. It wants to be called icon-512.psd. That's fine. Save it. Maximize compatibility. Sure. Click OK. And now Photoshop tells me here that I've got my icon saved. So take a couple minutes, play around with this, make something interesting, and then when we're done with that, I'll show you what to do on the next steps. Click and hold.
Play with that. See if you move this. Play with this.
Actually, I have numbers. I just didn't realize I was supposed to go on.
Yeah. Have you ever enrolled in class here?
That's online.
Okay, yeah, so take those numbers, and then what you want to do is either in the office or on your computer, go to our website, and then log into SDCE, and then there's a registration link on the bottom right corner. Log in there, and then use those numbers to sign yourself to You actually want to use yes. Exactly. Well, more like the zero. But those are the little point. That drawing is made out of points. So the other two, you're actually able to manipulate each one. Let's say just like stretches. To give it a bigger head. Here,
right layer, you're on the line two. Switch back to the shape tool. Go this one here, the rectangle, the shape tool that you use. So you come out this one here. That's the one you use to draw shapes. So right layer, let's switch back to the shape tool.
I don't think I'm using this.
That's why you see it. This one you wanna because when I think if you put you see how you're making a mistake, you can't change it. You put move to it. this one is 36. Imagine how you had it already.
Yeah.
So on 36,
Yeah.
how about the effects of it's on the actually. It made it so this one, you just any layer you want to mess with, you always make sure. Because if you start doing stuff, you could be so always make sure it's like that. What happens is this effect you already have is also affected. See, just like change the color.
All right, so obviously we can spend a bunch of time on this, but we can come back to it later. This is my icon. I didn't go too overboard. You can do however you want, of course. But the thing is that if you think about this, if you had an Android phone for a few years, you remember its style a few years ago. Perhaps you remember that it was a lot of sort of like glows and drop shadows, like a lot of like Tron effect, I would say. The style of the Android phone itself, its icons and everything, had a certain style. Then at a certain point, it got upgraded, and then suddenly your icons looked a little different. So, more flat. The current design at the moment has a specific name, but Google sets out a series of guidelines about if you're going to make an Android app, try to follow these guidelines to make it feel like an Android app. Apple does the same thing. A few years ago, theirs was also very sort of, the term was skeuomorphic, which was a real-world object in your phone. If you've had an iPhone for a few years, you might remember, your Notes app it looked like a little leather-bound notebook, and people loved that years ago when that was, look at this thing in my pocket. But then now the style of the notes on the iPhone is also very flat. Now it's just basic colors with a little bit of shadow and such. So these things have evolved. The language, the design language, the style of these have evolved. So right now I wanted you to do whatever you wanted to show you you can do whatever you want. But I want to take a quick digression over to the Android developer's website to explore something here that you should look at in more detail, because if you're going to make your own icons, your own apps in the future, you should learn as much of this as you can, and these are huge topics. But go to your web browser and go to developer.android.com. Remember last week I mentioned this. Developer.android.com is where we go to get all the documentation, advice and tips, and check troubleshooting and all of that to keep up to date with it all. Developer.android.com. And at the top we've got Design, Develop, Distribute. Even though I said part 1 last month focused more a bit on the design aspect of things, this month focuses a bit more on the develop aspect of things, and next month will be on the distribute aspect. Even though I said that, things do bleed over into the different classes and the different parts of the procedure. I might be coding the project as I'm also designing the icons and such, which is kind of what we're doing now. So I want to look at that design section. At the top, click Design. And here it'll talk about Material Design, which is the name of the design language of the current Android operating system. So graphic design has existed for 200 years, and then eventually web design and app design. And basically people can get degrees, college degrees, and well-paying jobs designing things, especially useful things, and things that make sense. You know, nowadays it's more en vogue to create signs, especially at buses and airlines and such, that are iconographic rather than text, because I can read English, but not everyone that comes into that airport, especially if you're in an international airport. You can't expect everyone to read that language. But if I go to Thailand, I can't read Thai, but I can read that icon that says bathroom that way. You know, the iconography of these things, the design language. Android has a design language, iPhone has a design language, Windows Phone, Amazon Kindle, all of them have the design language. And this is what we would learn on this screen here, the design aspect of it. You know, how we should present our animations. You know, it tells you, like, when you animate something, make sure you animate it from the right into the left if it means this. Make sure you animate it from down to up if it means that. On the style, we're going to see here that it says if you're going to make any drop shadows, make sure it's 3 pixels. So all of this has been thought out. People getting, you know, 6-figure salaries over at Google thought about all of this and then published it as the guidelines, and every official Google app follows this. If you recall from using your Android device for years, you know, the icon of that app store looked a certain way a few years. It had a little drop shadow, then it had a shine on it and all of that. And now when you look at it, it looks like a little folded piece of paper, an interesting, you know, folded paper. The Gmail icon looks like a little envelope, but it's not over the top like I remember, with a big drop shadow and, you know, a lot of specular highlights and such. And now this is a lot flatter. Literally, I can look at it, it looks like a little piece of paper, an interestingly colored piece of construction paper. And if you really care about this stuff and design and such, you will read all of this stuff and you will see that they actually did it that way. They got little pieces of construction paper and cut them and folded them and put lights on them and said, look at how this looks in the real world. How can we recreate that in a digital way? So for us, I'm just guiding you to this. We're not going to do too much here, but they're giving us some icons here. You know, we've got the Photoshop icons, but they're giving us here the official icons from Android that we can download, and design templates, these files that we can open up in Photoshop so that we know everything is pixel perfect lined up. We're given color palettes and a specific font. The Roboto font and the Noto Sans font are the official Android fonts. So mine is using Times New Roman. No wonder it doesn't look like a real, quote-unquote, Android app. So all of these little things add up to make it look like a real app. And then iPhone, it has its own design language that I can go look up at developer.apple.com, and its color palette. and its font and its icons. And I can do that for Windows, and I can do that for Mac. For us, we're not going to worry about it too much because, again, we are not perhaps designers. If you take this class, we're going to focus more on the nuts and bolts of it, and you may not want to deal with the graphic aspects of it. You may want to team up with someone that can do the graphics. They'll design your graphics, follow these rules here, and then you just drop them into your project. So, like, you know, that looks like an Android icon more than an iPhone icon. Color palettes. You can go in and you can get these color forms. These are official color. These are the official colors of Android. If you want to look at this, I found it under. Scroll down to resources, color palettes, and then click on color. You can download it as a swatches, but if you click on color, it'll say here's the colors. If I want a red, it's this formula of red. How do I use that in Photoshop? I need this color for that icon. You saw that you can choose colors on top here. I want one of these colors. I don't see that color here, but I see a color formula. Every color is represented as a color formula. You can access that by clicking the fill color, clicking this color picker, and then down here, you fill in that color formula, #, and then you fill in that code, which was, in my case, F4, doesn't matter, uppercase, lowercase, 4336. And so there's that color. There's the official red color of Android, not that one right there, that's wrong. And for people that really care about design and such, that's very important. On my projector, you don't see too much of a difference. But on my screen, I see a better difference. And on these high-quality screens, you'll also see the difference. So if you care about that and finding the perfect colors, they give you the colors right there. You just adhere to them. Different shades and tints of them, different hues. Let's say I actually want a blue. I got all of these blues under indigo and under blue. I'm going to go with this one here. $21.96 F3. So that was my previous color. There's my current color. Again, whatever your icon looks like will work for the project. But if you go spend some time over at developer.android.com, you can look up here and you will see this is what those 6 figures get you to create this design language and text such as color in material design is inspired by bold hues juxtaposed with muted environments, deep shadows, bright highlights, etc. So the marketing aspect of this material takes cues from contemporary architecture, road signs, pavement, marking tape, and athletic courts. Color should be unexpected and vibrant. Great, just give me the formula. So here it is. And then notice how you can combine those. Notice those two colors, a primary color and an accent color. This is a whole huge topic of graphic design. We don't have time to talk about that here. Hopefully you get that in some of our other classes. But poking around on this site maybe can inspire you and guide you, and you can create this app that will look nice for your project. And because we're using a Cordova project, a Taco project, it can be exported to all the platforms. I can set this up so that it detects or when I export it, if it's going to go to the iPhone, it'll have this color palette. If it's going to go to the Android, it's going to have that color palette. We can set that up too, that for the appropriate device, it'll load its own set of colors and its own set of fonts and its own set of sizes and all of that. We'll get to that later, but those are platform overrides. I might have a basic app that looks, generic gray, but when I export it through Taco over to iPhone or Android or Windows or whatever, it will then automatically override the defaults and give me the right design per platform. Do only use the accent color for body text to accent a web link. Don't use the accent color for body text color. So all of these things that the big wigs at Google designed and thought of to make a good design, and it makes sense. That's a nice color combination there, and that's not, because that button gets lost. So tangibly, I'm going to go back to Photoshop. Let's say I've designed my app icon. Here it is. Save your work at this point. My documentation says I need 4 sizes, 36 pixels, 48, 72, and 96. And then I need to name them with these names and save them into my Res Icons Android folder. Let's do that, then we'll take a break. Go up to File menu. Again, it might not be finished, but you'll be able to do so fully later. Go up to File menu, Export. Export as. I'm going to export this file, and we'll select Export as. So here you should see this checkerboard pattern. That's the representation of transparency. Imagine that this icon is on someone's home screen, and everything that is the checkerboard is transparent, so they will see their wallpaper in that empty area. If yours still has a plain white background, something like that, the problem will be is you're going to have a little weird white square behind your icon instead of transparency. And notice, if you've got the plain white square back there, try turning on transparency at top right. It's going to save us ping format, which is what we need, with transparency, but it's too big. Our canvas size, our image size is currently 512. We only need this to be 96 pixels. So we want to type here 96. Rounded. For an exact size, please use canvas size or scale the layer in the document. Okay. So I'm usually just one moment. Now I'm not a big pro on Photoshop CS, Creative Cloud. I'm more of a classic Photoshop user, so just one moment here. I guess let's try the canvas size. 96. Nope. Okay, let's do this. Cancel that. Click on Cancel at the bottom. Instead, we'll go up to File menu, Export, Save for Web Legacy. That's the one I know. File menu, Export, Save for Web Legacy. Here we go. So, at the top right corner, presets. Let's change our preset to 24, ping 24. Make sure transparency is on. And then now on this size down here, image size, let's change that to 96. Click Save. This needs to be saved in your project folder. Mine is on my flash drive. So I'm going to select my flash drive, my apps folder, today's template project. So I'm going to open up that template. Inside of Res, inside of Icons, inside of Android, I just shrunk it down to 96. I want to replace the 96 pixel one here. Click on it once, and you will see that your file name changes from icon 512 to icon 96xhdpi. I'm going to replace the old icon, the temporary placeholder icon, with the one I just drew. Make sure you're in that folder. So I click once the icon 96, it'll take its name, click Save, and it'll complain. Are you sure you want to replace that? Yes, I know what I'm doing. So click Replace. So in that folder now, I've got one of those icons replaced with my icon. I'll do the same thing for the 72 pixel sized one. So let's go back to File menu, Export, Save for Web Legacy. It remembered ping 24, good. Transparency. If it didn't, make sure you set this to ping 24 preset, transparency, and the size 72. Save, and it should remember your Android folder. There's the 72 pixel one I want to replace, so click on it to take its name. Save, confirm that you're replacing. And now you try the next two. You try to replace the 48 pixel one and the 36 one. And of course, if you had a little trouble, call me over, but we'll also take a moment to take a break at this point. At 7:16, we'll take a break, replace those icons, we'll be back at 7:26, and then we'll do the splash screen. And then we will code this for it to fully work.